everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the Design Nation conference. My name is Kathy Lee, and I'm the Director of Design for Design Nation 2021. I'm so excited to present the Designing Spaces panel today, featuring amazing executives from Lander & Fitch, 8 Inc., and Gensler. Why don't we start off by having our executives introduce themselves in the order on my screen, starting with Lisa.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm Lisa Chumley. I am a principal in our San Francisco office. I'm an architect, a manager. I've been at Gensler for 12 years, my 4th Gensler office. I've been in London, the Middle East, not
here. That sounds amazing. What about Janice next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Janice Cavalier, also a partner at Gensler with Lisa. I've been at Gensler over 20 years, which is kind of astounding. And I am a design director focused on bringing experiences and the brand experiences to life in the built environments primarily.
Thank you. What about Roy?
My name is Roy Kim. I'm the principal in charge of the New York office of 8 Inc. We're a global multidisciplinary experience design firm. I'm trained as an architect and interior designer, but we actually very similar to Gensler. We really design for the entire human experience. So we begin with human outcomes and kind of work our way back. So our strength really is in design strategy, and then what that ends up becoming physically all depends.
And finally, Alistair.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm a designer, and I know just enough to be dangerous around interior design and architecture. I have the pleasure of what used to be formerly known as Fitch for about 20 years, where I started my working career in London. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've moved to New York City, which is my home. And Fitch has morphed on to become Landor & Fitch, and we're all about extraordinary brand transformation. My focus around experience, of course, that's where I'm on the panel. And I'm the Group Executive Creative Director for our 8 studios here in North America. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Sounds good. I'm also looking forward to this conversation. So to start it off, a question for everyone. Given the shift from physical to virtual during this pandemic, what is your definition of space, and why is designing in this space important? If anyone would like to start.
I'll jump in. I'll start. We'll warm up with this one. So it's an interesting question because I'm not sure that the definition of space has changed so much as I think how people think about how we use spaces has really changed, right? I think we used to make the assumption that oh, everyone's going to come to this place and do this thing, a little bit more so than maybe we're doing right now, where we've really, we're really realizing that there's a lot more diversity of experience, and that when we do get together, that it needs to be a little bit more meaningful, and we really need to think about the purpose of what space is doing for us a little bit differently, and we also need to think about the experience for people who maybe aren't able to access that space in the same way that others are, whether that's comfort level or proximity. So I think right now we have just, we're very aware, I think, of a lot of things that we could be doing better to create more equitable experiences, more meaningful experiences. And that's probably the biggest, one of the biggest shifts that I've seen.
I really like, Janice, how you sort of reframed it from space to place. And I kind of think how we've been experiencing it and thinking about it is that it's increasingly less about place, but it's around people finding their sort of pace in the world. Because it used to be you go to one store and you go shopping at a physical bricks and mortar place, 10, 15 years ago it became e-com, then become mobile commerce, now social commerce and X, Y, and Z. And there's many different ways that we could shop. And I think with regards to like the working place, it used to be that we all went to an office. Some of us were lucky to work in a studio place. And the last year we've kind of been finding our sort of pace in this sort of hybrid world of a little bit here, a little bit in coffee shops, maybe in a physical studio, but much more of a hybrid approach to place and space. I think it's kind of like a really interesting point in time where all professionals are really sort of asking big questions like what does the future hold? And I don't think it's about singular places as such.
Mhm. Yeah,
I think
would
another
agree
thing-
with that. Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
I was just thinking that another thing that's interesting is that we've also, I feel like, spent this year looking for the ways that the virtual can feel like the space or place we were in, right? So that we were drawn to things like Miro, or the number of things where it feels like you're in a room together. You know, that before, if we all used to use other platforms, it was sort of sufficient that you could see the person's face, and that already was better than a call, just seeing the face. But now in the past year, it's kind of, how can we be interactive? How can we have a chat or do something else? I think we've looked for different ways of making the virtual approximate being in the same place, right? Or in the same.
It's interesting to me because, you know, a lot of us are trained initially as physical space place makers. So right now, I think there's this kind of uncomfortable juxtaposition between physical space and I consider it kind of spiritual space, because it's simultaneously external to us and internal to us, right? This is the kind of space that if you close your eyes and you meditate or you're dreaming, this is a similar kind of space that's just kind of out there, right? Like we don't really know where this is. It's just in the air, in the electric wave. So right now we're in the infancy of these two spaces kind of fusing together. So either we'll all become fully avatars that are completely digital, or we'll come back to this completely analog existence, which obviously that's not going to happen. But it's a very interesting, like as much as we talk about mono-channel and omni-channel, digital first, all of that, there's still, the two spaces are not really aligned. So there's whenever there's this kind of tension, I think that's where the most opportunity for innovation is.
Roy, it's really interesting, the point you made about we're trying to sort of make one thing like another thing, right? Like we sort of default to like, well, and Lisa, you started this, right? Like how do we make the virtual feel like we're together, or like we're in the office we used to be in, or we're in, you know, we're all together in the woods. And it's an interesting opportunity, right? Where how to bring people together, maybe we need to get out of that paradigm a little bit where we're not trying to force the virtual to be like the physical, but it's just opening our minds to, you know, the potential of very different ways of connecting and finding that experience. You know, if it's not in a physical place, what does that look like? And does it have to look like a physical place, or is it something totally different? It's a very interesting question.
And then oh yes.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I was just going to riff off Janice there and kind of acknowledge that if we were all in our studios and had our studios behind us, there would probably be different versions of minimalistic warehouse studio creator spaces. But what I think one of the benefits of the last year is I've never met Roy. I look forward to meeting him in person one day. But I have kind of a bit of a view into his spiritual world with his backdrop, as well as Lisa. Unfortunately, Janice is in dark early hours and down with your very beige backdrop. But I think what's it's not simply about physical and virtual. I think one of the benefits of Zoom is, in this world that we've lived the last year, be students or professionals, is that it's given us much more sort of visibility into like people's souls and hearts and lives. And when dogs come in and the kids come in and all the noise and chaos, that's much more real. And I'd hate us to step away from that going forward. I think that's one of the absolute sort of advantage or discoveries, magic that we've all discovered this last year, that we don't have to turn up and look like corporate bots, that space and places can be much more sort of articulations of authenticity of who our personalities are. You know, I'm excited by that.
I know my favorite part of my classes is always when the dogs come in. So
Yeah.
I'll be missing that when we go back on campus in the fall. And
The
then
dogs-
If you guys need some barking, I'll call mine in.
Yeah, my
some
dog's right
background.
there as well.
And then transitioning from that question to the next one, what has been different about designing spaces in a virtual landscape as opposed to like the process pre-pandemic? And as a result, has your own concept of space changed at all?
Janice started last
Good
time.
questions, Kathy.
I mean, I think one thing that, I'll start just to get going on that. I think it really has sort of reevaluated about, do we need to build more? Now, I think as a designer, I was sort of educated, Northern European design was all about put 3 things down, remove 1 or 2. And reductive design was more of a graphical sense of, it's more powerful with less things on the page, on the paper. And I think increasingly I've kind of got to that with space in places like, do we need to build more? And I've kind of got to, I don't think we do. So it's arguably about removing things and taking things away. And it's less about, it kind of breaks my heart, but it's less about building new greenfield things, but it's actually about refurbishing and upcycling existing spaces. I think that's become, for me, much more sort of front of mind in the last year through this pandemic of arguably what we can take away to make things more pointed as opposed to just additive.
I've seen a big shift to the need for more flexibility. Just as far as, again, kind of going back a little bit to the first question, how are we using these spaces and places, and what, the way we're thinking about them now, I think is, much more flexibly. They have to be very adaptable. We have to be more adaptable in our process. And I also think that, kind of designing a bit more virtually has opened up, it's opened up new doors in terms of how we emphasize purposeful collaboration, not just assuming it's going to happen, but really bringing people into the process, really thinking about the experience people are having in different places to access certain types of information. So I think that's a big one too, right? Like the way we're collaborating to design is very different. And then the way we're kind of needing to be adaptable and flexible and think about actually, space in the same way has been very interesting.
I think picking up from that, actually, what's interesting too is that because everyone is virtual, the idea of collaborating can go broader than you ever thought before. That because we maybe felt limited by who can attend this, who can be in this place at this moment for this collaboration, and it needed either be someone who could get on a plane quickly or someone right, within a few hours drive. But now you think, oh, I want to talk with that person in Munich. Great. So the idea of who can be part of the design process is also completely changed, absolutely opened up, because everyone is kind of everywhere, right?
Yeah, it's definitely changed our hiring policies as well, right? We don't just hire for somebody who's, in a 1 hour radius drive from New York City. We have offices in San Francisco and London, and so the San Francisco office has hired somebody who lives in New York. We're interviewing people who are on the West Coast. So it's, I do think though that when the doors open again, I don't know if you all have felt this, but the few instances where I've had more than one in-person social occasion in a day, I've come back home feeling exhausted because I'm not used to these in-person, this is a different kind of draining, right? Being on camera all the time. But I do miss the physical, and I think any designer does, because nothing beats that kind of in-person collaboration.
I'm with you.
I feel like,
because I think one of the definitions of being a designer is, yes, we need to arguably have good IQ, but it's all about EQ, emotional intelligence. And as much as you can kind of portray and kind of read what's going on through Zoom, actually, when you are in a physical space together, and as humans, we can still read 60-80% of what we're actually trying to say through non-verbal communication. And that's massively what we've missed the last year. And I used to pride myself and be able to decode kind of what was going on in any sort of room or with a client, with a group, and it's about dialing in. That's really hard through this format. So we've massively missed that. And I think spaces going forward, be it workspace or commercial spaces, I think it's really tapping into that sort of EQ side that that all this technology and bandwidth can't deliver on, unless technology can get there one day, but not
Well,
in
I think it might get there, but I miss three-dimensional space because, you know, like you said, Lisa, it's amazing that we can all, from wherever we are in the world, be talking like this. That is amazing. But, you know, I'm old, so I value three-dimensional space. And when I design for 3 dimensions, not for an Instagram shot. I have to admit that now I think everybody designs a little bit more for Instagram and this kind of like flat view. But a really powerful space is experienced 3-dimensionally and with all of your senses. So that's what we're kind of all starved for right now, right? We're all getting a lot of a certain vitamin and none of the other vitamin. We're gonna really drink that in when the world opens up again.
There's a term that I'm gonna credit one of my clients at LinkedIn with using a lot lately, which is ambient awareness, and you know, the idea that it's exactly what you're all describing. It's, you know, when you're in person, even if you're not having a direct interaction with someone, you're picking up the vibe, you're hearing something,
Yes.
you're picking up a cue, you're seeing something visually, right, that someone had put over on the wall, and you're developing this sense of ambient awareness, just like you're soaking in what's around you and you're learning from it, and you're getting to maybe even meet someone differently, right, because of it. And I totally agree. I also feel, I don't know if you felt this way, but I feel like, you know, 6 months ago, maybe a little more than that now, right? There was a scramble to like reimagine the future of space and how it was going to be so different. And that's still happening, but I'm also feeling, especially in the past month and a half, maybe, I'm hearing a lot more of, you know what? Eventually it's going to kind of be the same. Like we're going to open as usual. We're going to,
Absolutely.
And I don't know that that's totally true. I think a lot of what's come up about humanity, right, being a little more human, being more appreciative of what people need and flexibility, like hopefully those things are going to stay. But it's just been interesting to me because I feel like more and more people are like, nope, we're gonna, you know, we're sending everyone back to work, or nope, everything's going to open and we're going to use it just the way we did.
I think I'm totally with you on that, and I think it's around this idea of like individual journeys versus sort of collective groups. Because if I could go shopping to a physical space and do it all on my own and have no human interaction, well, to be honest, I could do exactly that on my sofa and buy the same product, maybe have a similar experience. But I think the last year has really reinforced to me that, like, if I go to a space, I'd really want to meet humans there, because pretty much every other experience can be replicated online or, you know, in a virtual world, arguably. So I think spaces going forward, be it commercial or work, it's going to be sort of like high impact moments that bring people together and we interact. That's not like being in a department store with 1,000 other people. We all have our headphones on, we don't communicate. I think brands and spaces about getting people together. And there's a little bit like, well, that brings us back to 5,000 years ago in a market square, really, where the market square brought people together to tell stories, to trade, and you know, and to make some money, you know. And I think there's maybe we are going through that moment in time where space is around that, not about solitary experiences.
Yeah, and speaking of like combining the current space or the 3D with the 2D space, there's a question in the chat about like how you see VR and AR playing a role in designing spaces in the future, or also like what is your take on like the emerging technologies and techniques like used to design spaces?
There's a really great, I've been looking for it and I can't find it. There's a really great interview with, oh my God, I forget his name. Who's the guy in The Mandalorian, the really famous German filmmaker? He plays the bad guy in The Mandalorian. Is it Wim? Is it Wim Wenders?
Oh, jeez.
Oh, I'm not sure.
It's funny because we've been watching The Mandalorian, but
Right.
I cannot think of that name.
You know, the guy who wants Baby Yoda. Like, anyway, so that's not his claim to fame, because he's actually a very serious filmmaker. But there's a great interview with him where he speaks about, he's being asked about the future of film, and he's saying that the future of film is actually not film. The future of film is fully immersive alternate realities. Which I find frightening, but who knows? Like if 100 years ago, these talking heads on these screens would have been seen as magic, right? And Newton would have been beheaded for promoting something like this. So, and human progression just keeps moving by leaps and bounds. But I think he's absolutely right. There's so much happening in AR and AI and VR that I think that the next frontier in entertainment is that we will appear in a virtual space and be able to look, see, maybe even touch, taste, and feel all around us and be able to interact. And so what is that? That's not really a film. I'm not really sure what. I think that's where we're going.
And in the last, we've been designing those sort of places, not yet with smell and aroma, but most of the other senses. So, a lot of our clients, their campus or their head office is closed and it may never, ever reopen. So as much as, again, you have sort of VC forums, we've been creating virtual places where employees meet and hang out, like virtual lounges that have different rooms and different experiences in. And they can learn, they can communicate, they can meet new people, interact with, say, products or launches like that. And what's really surprising is the retention and people coming back to those is relatively high, surprisingly high. And so to Roy's point, I kind of do see that's going to become increasingly part of a commercial world as well. I mean, AR, we've all been using it for years in retail to help products, be it CPG products or technology, how to enhance the storytelling through your own smartphone. So I think AR's kind of behind us. No, it's current and behind us. It's not the future necessarily.
I totally agree that I think the crossover of experience with sort of, augmented or virtual reality, right, is going to become really big. I mean, just sort of what Roy started to say, we've had a lot of conversations about, you're watching something, but you're also able to learn from it. Like it goes from an entertainment experience to an educational experience to a consumer experience, because then you can buy something. So I think that sort of ability to sort of immerse in a world and discover more and do more, we're going to see and continue to see a lot more of. And I do think in the design process, it's becoming very big. We're using it to connect people in work environments. We're using it more to collaborate with our teams, with our clients. So I think those tools are just going to keep getting, more robust and probably smaller and portable and easier for everyone to have access to, versus having to be in, a little bit more of a studio environment to do it, which we're already seeing too, right? It's just the level of quality, I think, will continue to increase at maybe a more portable personal level, which should enable, a pretty interesting kind of collaboration. And I'm curious, Lisa, like what you've seen kind of on the architecture side with that too, how much that's been changing how the teams are designing.
Well, I was also going to say that in a way, us using those tools are inevitable in terms of how we come back together, even for working. Like there will be such a key part of any sort of hybrid work mode that we have of, because to your point, Alistair, and I completely agree that the part of what we've gained this year is not just the insight into each other's kind of, the rest of our lives, but that we've realized, oh wait, I can balance these things much better. I can do something in the middle of the day and finish other thing later. So the idea that everyone wants a kind of more balance and flexibility in their time, and all these tools are the ways to get us there. Right? That it doesn't matter where I am, and I can still connect and do work, or I can find a place where, so that would really turn up the volume on the need for VR experiences. I think to go back to your question, sorry, Janice, to kind of your exact mic handover. I think it used to feel like a kind of really special thing to do with a client, to kind of ask them to put on the VR goggles, do something, and now it's sort of like, what's the next step? Right? So I think it's just the way to really bring people into the world. I think even the fact that we work in Revit more, and we're building this thing, not kind of drawing it in 2D and then imagining it. And so everyone is like thinking about the thing like as in its 3 dimensions all the time. I think that's just kind of the given. And so once you have that, once you are always making a model, then you can always interact with the model in all these really interesting virtual. which then changes the way that you can coordinate, you can design, you can share the idea. So I think that's a huge difference. I still, I'm old enough to really miss just like making a model, a physical model, and I still think there's an incredible part of just creativity that's still connected to making. But there's something else that really, like physically making something, but it's really powerful. The 3D tools.
Yeah, I think the danger of all the acronyms that have an R, or an AR, VR, mixed reality, goes on and on. But in real life, it's kind of, I think, the coolest R, if you like. And I suppose my badly made point here is that we shouldn't get lost in sort of technology zeitgeist of what is just the next piece of technology. And I think we need to be grounded in, if we are going to build or create a space, a place, what is its purpose? And its purpose shouldn't just be, oh, this brand is looking to sell more. Like, what is the brand, the owner of that place? What are they actually adding to the world, and being purpose-led places, if you like? And I think that's kind of a good grounding, that we don't get lost in technology, rabbit holes as well.
Or technology for technology's sake. Right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting.
Brilliantly well, Lisa. Yeah.
And as a follow-up question for that, like as technology continues to advance and new techniques are introducing like new experimental and and things, like what advice do you have for introducing like the emotion and the emotion into creative work that like won't be lost by like the emerging techniques and technologies? If that makes sense.
I think the other lesson of this year has been how much we crave being together, right? Like that if we think of all the things when the surges have gone wrong this year, it's because everyone wanted to get together, right? Traveling, holidays, like people need to be together, right? So, I think I feel certainly a kind of that this experience of spending so much time either alone or with a small group of people has really reminded us like how strong and how important our human connections are, right? That we do need to leave and connect and see each other, and as Roy was saying, in like real space. And while it will feel it is more tiring at first because we are not doing it enough, but I think this year has taught us that in our seclusion, how much coming together and that part of us is really strong and not take over it.
And I think that, spaces that are enhanced by technology can actually sometimes increase emotional feelings. Like, I don't know if you all know TeamLab, but the installations that they've done that are digital and completely immersive are really magical. And, they show streams of water coming down and flowers kind of moving and fish. That's an experience that you can't create without technology, at least not now, right? So that's an example of using a medium, like you use paint for one thing or pencils for one thing. And that the emotions you can evoke through that is I can't think of any other way to evoke those types of emotions. And it's also interesting to me because I feel like those experiences are much more personal and internal versus group oriented, because you're experiencing that really on your own. There might be somebody kind of nearby you, but the space is fairly dark. So it's a very intense personal experience versus if we were all together in a room. Like you were saying, Janice, it's very different. I've met people on Zoom and then met them in real life. And it's really interesting to me. Some people read very similarly through camera and some people are completely different. And it's just energetic, right? Some people give off a different kind of energy that is not being captured on the camera. But that's also what I find really interesting about all of this is the energetic part of it, that I think all of this kind of technology, I think, is a part of human evolution, like the evolution of our consciousness. And I think that it's not a coincidence that the increase in meditation and Buddhism and all of that is concurrent with all of this technology, because it's really pushing us beyond ourselves. So there's there's spaces we're going that we haven't gone before, even emotional.
And then speaking of spaces, this one's kind of like a fun one. What's your favorite space that you've worked on and in within the past year? And like, what's the story behind it?
Oh.
The
Well,
space worked
so-
on or in, right? Okay.
Does it have to be built or not yet built?
I think anything's fine.
Yeah, I guess you know what, for designers, like even if it's not built, it's kind of built in my head. I mean, so I can't tell you who this client is, but it's a pretty phenomenal client. And it's an office space that we're designing for them. They want the space to be very hospitality-like. So it's not going to be a typical office. It's the personal workstations will be very small so that people are encouraged to go up into these very kind of luxurious soft seating groupings. There's some amazing views. It's here in adjacent to a park. There's going to be some F&B that's pretty spectacular. And the client is pretty, they're very organized, they're global, and they're pretty visionary. So they want technology integrated into the space. So it's kind of a dream project, really. So that one excites me.
I'm going to say a client that we may have we definitely worked in the past, maybe working in the current and the future, is Lego, and we are the designers of Lego. And I think in any part of the world that would be described as fun.
That word just makes me happy. Lego.
Yeah, definitely.
I know, right?
Happy
It's like,
hours.
oh yes.
Yeah.
Coming to a store near you soon. I think one of the challenges with all these sort of design practices and architect practices, that an awful lot that we were designing in 2018 and 19 to launch last year all got delayed heavily. So we all kind of stutter around talking about things because there's an awful lot in the pipelines
Right.
that all got sort of put on pause or been heavily delayed or is penciled in to open at a later date. So I think that's one of the challenges that all these professionals that we all share at the moment.
Total combination of all of those things. We've actually been doing a lot of like virtual hypothetical spaces too, for some of our big tech clients, which has been super fun, you know, thinking about, I mean, it goes back to the digital question a little bit, like how do you explore, create, access a space, just hypothetically for the future? What's the ideal, right? We've been doing quite a bit of that, and it's been really fun. But I'm actually gonna say that one of my favorite projects over this past year has been that we've had the opportunity to create a campaign for San Francisco International Airport around their sort of sustainability mission. You know, the airport is extremely driven by sort of resiliency and sustainability practices, and really wanting to be kind of on the cutting edge of that kind of design, especially when you think about such a large international like passenger hub, right, with people coming from all over. And so we've, our team specifically in sort of the brand design world has been working on bringing these really complicated stories of, you know, carbon and materiality and engineering and all the things that they're doing to be a more kind of resilient place down into these very fun, digestible, you know, infographics or animated nuggets that were, you know, ideally going to be in the airport for the passenger experience, but have kind of taken on this whole new potential for, you know, social media and digital. And it's just been a really fun thing to focus on, with, you know, with other things being a bit different. That something that kind of goes back to the point about purpose, right? It's getting to work with a client who has a really cool mission and a really great team, and figure out how to tell their story in a really compelling way that is about the space, and it's to be experienced in the space, but it's also to be experienced in, you know, so many other places. And I think just, you know, thinking about the points everyone's making about what we need as people and really what's important to us, working on projects like that have just kind of, I feel like those have been some of the things that have really kept our teams going, is that we're kind of helping to tell a story that's just a little bit bigger than the present moment.
Thank you so much for slightly breaking the rule, Janice, because I was going to as well. I was going to say what's been like my favorite mental space, but it kind of is. So Gensler's a lot of research that we've done for 20 years, like very long research trajectory. And we opened up a new institute last year around equity in the built environment. And the first year right now is focused on Black lives in design. And I'm co-director. And within those conversations, we're talking about climate injustice, conscious bias, amplifying Black voices, a number of topics around like how do we think about how we are making space and how we have created our built environment and how we could create our built environment that is far more focused on equity and justice. And so that has been really incredible, and looking at the work that teams are doing. So for example, one team is looking at climate injustice point and about any number of underprivileged neighborhoods and how they're more impacted by climate action. And so climate change and what that could mean and what sort of things could we build in those neighborhoods to reduce the effects of that. Or another team is looking at our public housing projects and how they, well, first, how are they not connected to cities right now, and then how they could be better connected. I think a lot of those perspective design ideas are most incredible.
I think to Kathy's question, as you know, we're all referencing the fun moments. I think, and fun brands or projects we've worked on. I think last year has also been a balance of to balance out the pride as well, and working on sort of tough projects that are actually you feel like, you know, in no way is a designer architect on the front line, but feeling like you are helping sort of society and community. And the pride I know that I and my team felt has been working on, not, if you like, classically a beautiful brand, but however, Walmart. We working on new design formats that have been rolled out for Walmart, and you know, the pride there is that it kept America fed and served all the way through some of the toughest moments over the last 12 months. And we get involved in like designing mobile vaccination trucks and things like that. So I think our team has done some, yes, fun things, but also pride in sort of trying to keep the wheels on the tracks over the last year as well, you know, in contributing the way that we can help.
Yeah, and then transitioning a little bit more to like the factors and the reasons for designing spaces. There's a question in the chat about like, what emotions do you think are the most suitable for communication and with responsive spaces, and like which emotions are like least suitable? And then there's another question that's like, in what ways can place-based strategies and human experiences ensure that healthy people and environments, like, this one was also to Roy a little bit, like previously you stated that well-designed spaces can improve health and well-being. It's like, what exactly does this entail, and like how does that interact with spaces?
Was that three? That was three questions, right?
Yeah, it's like all.
Go for it, Roy.
Let's do one each.
Yeah. Well, the last one was, can you repeat the last one?
Yeah, it was just previously you stated that well-designed spaces can improve health and well-being. What exactly does this entail, and in what ways can place-based strategies and human experience ensure that healthy people and environments interact in that way?
Well, the last one, you know, I think anybody that creates physical space believes that the design of physical space can improve human lives. I truly believe that. You know, it's interesting because, you know, I'll speak about one aspect of physical space design, which is, so New York City, one of the magical things about this city is that when you walk out the door, you really feel like anything that you can see, the Flatiron Building, the Empire State Building, that you all collectively, this mass of humanity that's all kind of walking outside, that we kind of own the space together, right? So the whole city is kind of our shared living room. But increasingly over the years, New York has, there's always been a very tenuous relationship between design and money. So the more money, the more incredible designs you get. But then these incredible designs tend to not be accessible by most people, right? Most people don't have access to these places. So I guess my answer to that is that I think what's happening now in terms of just justice overall and justice in every way, you know, and I'm Canadian, so every time I say the word justice in this country, I kind of choke a little bit because it's really, the justice system here is not just. It's not about justice at all. I think we're all very clear on that. But I think that the more that we talk about justice in terms of climate, in terms of race, in terms of income, that these things are also important to the formation of physical spaces and also contribute to the health and wellness that we can create for people, right? So, you know, when I was in architecture school, all the cool kids like could care less about anything that wasn't just studio and that wasn't aesthetically driven, right? So definitely not taught for human outcomes or for the human experience, right? We would scrub out the human experience by keeping people out of our renderings, right? It had to be pure and like really beautiful and rational. And I think that what's happening now, I mean, it's not that it's just happening right now, but I think things are kind of coming to a head that, you know, I value making beautiful things in beautiful places, but that's not the point. That's not the main point, and it shouldn't be the main point. It should be the well-being of humanity in general.
Yeah, and then using this to transition to the second question, like this one was from the chat, and it was similar to the speakers. One of the reasons I love TeamLab's work is because of the unique interaction the person's emotions have with the space. What emotions do you think are most suitable for communication with responsive spaces, and what are least suitable?
I mean, it's a complex question. I'll approach that question from a slightly different angle. That is, as people, as humans together, we're sort of naturally drawn to spaces that instinctively fulfill our needs. And just sort of going into a little bit of sort of human science, there are 4 needs that humans need. We need progress, comfort, independence, and belonging. So any space needs to deliver a number of those in different combinations to actually fulfill the needs, which becomes the emotional response. Maybe I don't want to make this too complex, but what we've done at Lander & Fitch, we kind of decoded those 4, and we've created this tool called Experience Themes, and there are essentially 12 themes. And it's all about triggering the emotions of the user, the consumer in that space. So there's actually a lot of sort of science behind designing these future spaces so they connect with people's emotions.
You know, one way to do that, I mean, I think that's really interesting, right? Because I think any emotion, like, I mean, really driving emotion is kind of the goal, right? Creating some kind of an emotional connection. I'm not sure the specific emotion, you know, can be sort of pinpointed. I mean, it's so individual, what's going to be effective or what's going to resonate or what's going to be personally meaningful for somebody. But I do, you know, I love telling stories, and that's why I'm a designer. It's sort of to think about what is the story of this place? What is the story of this thing? What is the bigger story here that we can you know, kind of expand on and bring people into? And it's, as humans, the reason we really love stories is because sort of chemically in our brain, we hear a good story and we instantly trust it. You know, we're not like, well, what exactly was the stat that drove that one to, like, if it's a good story, I mean, think about reading a book or watching a movie, right? You're in it. And I think that's really the power we have as designers in terms of driving that emotion, is to, you know, think about what is that, how are we bringing the story to life for people? And that's going to mean so many different things to so many different people. But anytime you get an emotional connection, I feel like that's a great win, whatever that connection is for somebody.
Yeah, I agree completely. I design by story a lot.
I think to answer that person's question, I don't think any of us are saying there's a right or wrong emotion today, right?
No.
Right.
So the fact that an emotion is elicited is the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our job is to trigger emotions, stimulate in a way. I mean, to the storytelling, I totally agree. That's exactly why I'm involved in branding, stories. And there's a bit of a buzz phrase that, well, I may, some days I like, but it's the sort of, with regards to places, spaces, it's about story doing, not storytelling. Because a storytelling can be a little bit how the brand or the corporation wants to broadcast at you with a narrative. And story doing is, I think, I know all these agencies here all believe in, it's about actually creating an experience, and people in that space actually create their own story to take away. So it's not a broadcast environment. I mean, arguably museums, old school museums, are sort of linear narrative storytelling, but however, what we're all designing is much more sort of story doing experiences where you take your own narrative from that.
Well, I love that, because I think that's and I'm really passionate about this too, but it's about empowering people to have more control over their experience, right? It's about giving people, it's being driven by how people are, what people want to be doing, what their mission and purpose is, what they're doing collectively, right, to shape an experience. And I kind of feel like in the branding world, we've been seeing that trend on the consumer side for a while. I don't, whether or not it's how deep it goes, I'm not sure, but kind of giving more consumer control. And I think we're seeing that a lot more in the design of space and place, and even at a corporate level, what do the people who work for you, how are they shaping the experience? How are they shaping the sense of what this place should be? Super
we can
interesting.
see your space a bit more, Janice.
Isn't this fun? It's like a slow reveal.
And transitioning to the last part of the panel, which is some advice for students, there's a couple questions again. So the first one is from the chat. So it's do you have any advice for young designers, especially first-year students at college, university, who may feel insecure or unmotivated in their design skills due to online learning and lack of creative environment/isolation? And then another one we could go into is how to find a good balance between working, communicating virtually, and working in a space with others.
Well, I mean, my advice would be to trust your gut. And, design, I think, more than most other professions, it's a very emotional choice to be a designer, right? It's so, I mean, based on my own experience, I'll give an example, which is that from a very young age, I've rearranged furniture and moved things around, and it was just something I always did. I've always been very spatially good, right? I'm very bad at many things, but spatial relationships, it just came to me naturally. So I never valued it as a skill. And then I'm 49 years old. So at the time that I was growing up, it was still it still is challenging to come out as gay. But I remember thinking internally, my internal homophobia was so strong that I thought, if I choose interior design as a profession, I'm basically outing myself, right? So, but it goes even further. So when I finally had the courage to go into architecture school and graduate as an architect, I didn't even realize that for so many years, every designer design is about scale, right? And every designer has a scale that they're most comfortable and adept at, right? Like urban planning to architecture to interiors to product to typeface. And it took me many years to realize I'm actually more of an interiors person than an architecture person. But I always knew that, right? I knew that from the age of 5 years old. I can't believe it took me so long to unpeel the layers. So this is what I mean about know yourself, right? Know yourself, let yourself be yourself. I think the more time you spend in quiet, you don't need other people's opinions. You really don't. You can learn from other people, right? And you can be mentored, but you don't need other people's opinions because you actually know everything inside. So that's my advice. Spend more time with yourself, get to know yourself better, and you'll have the answers. You have to trust yourself.
I have a thought about kind of our immediate situation and a bigger comment. One is that what I have found really important right now around kind of creativity is I go for a walk most days. And part of it was kind of ending my workday. So I could stop working, go for a walk. I may do work after, but while I'm on my walk, I have a kind of forced design exercise. And it just feels like a free moment to be outside and kind of just taking a picture. So not quite like an Instagram moment, but so that's the kind of, and all that to say, for me, was finding a personal design moment every day that was separate from what I may have to do, and I guess for school or for work. So like reminding myself of why I'm a designer by just sort of seeing the world and kind of capturing it and thinking about it. And so the next piece would be go see the world. And I have lived all over the world. And I think that part of why I love traveling or love living in places that wouldn't call home, are because I love the way when you aren't home, you see everything and you notice everything. You pay attention to the way that the cashier took your money. You pay attention to the way that you pay. I love in Alistair in London that you don't pay a black cab driver in the cab. You get out and you pay
through the window.
To the window. But so you don't, and people who live there, they don't even notice that is a unique way to pay a cab driver, right? To leave the car and pay through the window rather than through the kind of funny thing. So I'll just say, like, see the world, because when you see the world, you will know yourself better and you will know the world better. And it can't help but kind of infuse everything.
I'm with you there, Lisa. I'm not going to carry on the taxi front, but to your point about just getting out, I think there's a real mistake around what is design, and design is definitely not about pushing pixels around a screen, and it's absolutely not about going on Pinterest and finding images. I personally think Pinterest is the devil. It's the laziest approach to design, because essentially I wouldn't even say you're riffing, you're kind of copying. So
you're just copying.
Yeah, so ignore all of that. I appreciate we're still hopefully in the latter stage of pandemic, but it's going out and doing and seeing things with your own eyes and bringing that into your ideas. I'd also say having your own projects, your own little passion projects, your own hustles. I think those increasingly interesting and relevant.
Yeah.
To keep the fire burning. I do feel very sorry for students who are working from home, studying remotely and not on campus. I hope you get back there soon. Some of the best moments of my life. I met my wife while at university and some of my friends for life. So it is the social side of study, of university life. It's equally as important as the actual academic as well, because it's your character ultimately that will take you through your professional life, not actually the certificate you take. And I say that with love to the university heads, but it's true. So it's having the balance of the two. A bad answer from me, but there's some thoughts.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Well, that energy, I mean, I think that goes to even just spend time with people, right? I mean, see things, see the world, and get to know people, get to know the people you're designing with or for, or, I've found that I've soaked up a ton of energy from the different design opportunities I've had in terms of like the people that are really like someone, needs help with a design problem and their personal passion for something that they're developing, like really getting to know kind of what you're solving for and the people behind it, to me has been a real place where I've found sort of creative energy too, is just sort of like get in there, right? Like learn about stuff, see stuff. All these answers have been so great. But yeah, I do think there's just so much creative energy I think you can get from finding those experiences, meeting those people, and not getting too hung up on like the academic, side of it.
I think unless someone else says something else, I just wanted to come back to another point. The difference between Roy was honest about his age. I'll be less honest, but let's just say it's probably maybe 1 or 2 years north of that. I know you're surprised to hear that, but I think, the difference between when I studied to when you are studying now is that I didn't think about AI and all of that in the future. And that's really your reality. Now, when you look at the lists of which professions are going to be created by AI and bots, it's lawyers, it's truck drivers, and we all see the list, but what's right at the bottom, I think the bottom three, it's hairdressers and creatives. Now that is your superhuman advantage, pretty much over the rest of all the professional worlds. Is that AI won't for a considerable number of years be able to do left brain, right brain, turn problems over, see things from a different perspective, and create fucking magic. That is what you have the opportunity to do. Don't lose track of that.
Yep, so this past hour has been an amazing opportunity to explore the space of spaces, and I'm sure all the attendees and I have so much to think about for the rest of the conference. As we are wrapping up for this panel, I would love to thank all the executives for taking time out of their busy schedules to speak with us today. Thank you so much. This conversation was really amazing and interesting. And with that, this wraps up the Designing Spaces panel for DN21.
Thank you,
Thank
Kathy.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice to meet you.
everyone.
Nice meeting you all.
You too.
Nice
This
panel.
was really fun.
Yeah, it's great. Have a great day.